3 NFL subject matter pop-up topics. That's what we're going to talk about. Ron is surprising us with questions. We don't know what he's going to talk about. So what are they, Ron? Fire away.
Well, Chris and Ted, it's time to put you guys on the spot.
Wow.
Because as handicappers, we are always looking for an edge. So this is going to be experimental. Maybe we'll find an edge. Maybe you'll say, no, there's nothing we can be done with this. But everything that's experimental, you find a needle in a haystack, you find a diamond in the rough. So let's go to question number 1. We'll start with Ted. And the question has to do with analytics. And Ted, this is one of your near and dear subjects, because we know all about Brandon Staley and the Los Angeles Chargers. So let me read this. Over the past 3 years, we've seen more coaches going for it on their side of the field on 4th down than ever before. And we're not talking about 4th and 1 or 4th and 2. We're talking 4th and 5 from the 38-yard line, 4th and 7 from the 40-yard line. All sorts of stuff going on that we've never done before.
Yeah.
Is there a way to handicap this change of analytics, whether it be with totals, spread bets, looking at teams a different way? How do you handicap the fact that we're seeing more and more aggressive play calling?
Depends on the coach, and you brought up Staley, 4th and long at your own 18. That is handicapped as stupidity, is the way I see it. I don't care what era it is. If you're going for it from there, you're going to lose more than you're going to win. And also the circumstances of the game itself. We're talking about one specific play, but Brandon Staley still has to prove he's a quality head coach. He's done some good things, but they would have been in the playoffs last year if it wasn't for some boneheaded kind of moves. So how do you figure that out in odds? I don't know how that comes into play, but I think that if you got 2 coaches that both do tend to do those things in the same game, you might have something there, and you say, you know what, might want to play the overs because that might cost you some points in that game. Outside of that,
I found angles that I really liked about it last year. I brought it up, and that was using understanding that there's going to be more variance to those games. So I started focusing on what the alternate lines were looking like in the San Diego or the Chargers games, just because I thought that there was if they're going to lose, they're going to lose. They're going to keep on plugging away, and at some point, one of these games, they're going to lose by a large margin. You can get paid, and if you already like the other side, you can really get a nice price using those alternate lines.
Well, I love that angle, Chris, with the alternate lines. And I think that's a good one for everybody to pay attention to. As a follow-up, let me talk about 2-point conversions. Mike Tomlin started this 2 or 3 years ago, and now John Harbaugh has taken it to an absolute new level. But people are going for it for the 2-point conversion rather than the extra point more than ever. If you knew coming into 2022 that there would be a 20% spike in going for 2 points, would you be able to handicap it in advance, such as look at spreads that are 1, 2, pick them 3? Would you be able to handicap it if you knew that this was going to increase by 20%?
Well, what's the percentage of 2-pointers made these days? That comes into play big time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would say 1 in 3, but teams are more creative. Maybe it's better than that. Maybe
I think it's higher than 1 in 3.
Yeah, I think you're right. So that's a huge, if it was 1 in 3, you might not really pay too much attention to it, except for if you got Harbaugh on one side, I might take the other side if it's a close spread. Separate from that, I don't know if there's any major value in either side, but I do like the idea of one side or the other. I'm still going to take my chances that you're probably not going to make a better percentage of them. So I'll take the other side, the guy who doesn't do that as often.
I think the conversion rate is over 40%, but not much higher.
Okay.
But that comes into play it's already affected me for a couple of years, but it'll be a little bit more pronounced, and that is, what are the key numbers and how important are the key numbers? And we've already seen a shift. Since this is a pop-up topic, I don't have the chart handy, but the key numbers have changed over the last few years. 6 is a much more important number than it used to be. The 7, I'm trying to remember what else.
Maybe 4? Is 4 more?
No,
important?
the 4. Believe it or not, the 4 is just kind of stayed about the same, or gotten a little bit worse.
Oh, okay.
But your 1s and your 2s land a little bit more often. Your 6,
Right.
I saw the biggest jump, and I believe 8 saw a little bit of an increase also. But you obviously have your 3 and your 7 as your most common numbers. But it just goes to remind you to not be spending too much to be buying numbers, and they don't have the same value. It's going to be really hard to get that value. But with these types of variables, with the 2-point conversions and the going for it on 4th downs, I'm always gearing for either alternate lines or in-game opportunities if I happen to be in an in-game opportunity. And it also affects your possible teaser considerations. Probably not, because you're always doing the same teasers, but that's all I can think about it.
I'm wondering, Ron, and we have talked about this in the past a lot, about when it is smart to buy or not to buy the extra points, and how much does the 2-point conversion come into play now in that category for you? Is that really a major factor?
Well, I'll make 2 points on that. It's never smart to buy in general, unless you can get a very nice price like South Point has on buying on and off 3, which has been 110. And other places won't even give you the time of day for that kind of number. But I was just thinking out loud while you were talking, the spread of -1.5 or +1.5 has been pretty much a dead number for years and years and years. But what if it's not such a dead number anymore because of these 2-point conversions?
It stopped being a dead number. It's not a dead number anymore. The 1 and the 2 come in. And I'll also say never, because there are times that you buy points, but they are rare. They are rare, and it's gonna. You just have to make sure that you're paying a dime, and it's certain situations, especially when the market is leaning heavily, and you know where the market's going to be heading. Then that's added value, and it also depends if you're allowed to buy through numbers for the same price for each half point. So, just some variables, but it is pretty close to never. Question number 2. What is it?
Okay. Question number 2, and I think what we did with question number 1, I'll grade that as a thumbs up in terms of good stuff to know. Let's see if we can hit for question number 2. In baseball, the saying goes that pitching is ahead of hitting early in the season. So my question to you, start with you, Ted. What about football? Do you feel that offense is ahead of defense at the beginning of the season, or vice versa? And regardless of which way you think, do you think you can use that in terms of handicapping early in the season? And I'm thinking not just full game, but for halftime betting, first half, second half, and so on.
Well, in-game totals as well may come into play there. I think the offense is ahead of the defense early in the season, mostly because the defense, they don't play the way they used to. Right now, we're not going to have as many preseason games. You don't have the hitting and the what they used to practice, the way they used to practice. To me, a lot of times defenses don't even really get to their peak until several weeks into the season now than the older days. So absolutely the offense is ahead, and may want to hedge on the O's there throughout the early, whether it's in or out of game, or just regular totals, if you know what I mean.
Ron, how many week 1 games went under last season?
I couldn't tell you. There was a trend from the year before where these totals were just not high enough. They didn't adjust. The odds makers took a little bit of time realizing how how much the game had changed in terms of not only the analytic part, but that offenses were clicking a little faster because of the shorter preseason games. And I think the totals were set too low for week 1.
Yeah, but let's not forget that was also 2 years ago, the start of the pandemic, which changed everything.
Yeah,
Last
So
year,
that's true too.
Yeah, you can't.
last year I thought they all went under. It was like something like 13 and 2 under, wasn't it?
Yeah, so you may be right about last year. So are we talking about something there that kind of we don't know about and we can't find an edge in, or is there maybe another way to look at it? What about new coaches? And I haven't done the work on this, but would you guess if I made the assumption that new coaches would be a little bit more conservative out of the gate because it's their first job, they don't quite know what they're doing? Is that a way to go, or do they just have lapses in defense or special team play because they don't know what they're doing?
Well, how about if the new coach has a new quarterback? I mean, that means a lot too, right? So, I mean, you got a veteran guy, you got a new coach. If you got somebody like Matt Ryan's been there 100 years, it's not as big of a deal. So I think there's a lot of circumstantial stuff there. But look, how many times we've always said, try to back off the new coach stuff first year until they establish something. I'm going against them most of the time for a lot of reasons.
Let's not forget Lyons Campbell. He did a lot of goofy things, and some of them paid off. The onside kicks, the going for it on fourth downs unexpectedly. So that could be a new trend coming in as the coaches are younger and a little bit more with it and a little bit more open-minded. I have to imagine we start to see a lot more of this wacky stuff. But
it depends who the coach is too, of course.
But one of the other major concerns about that the early season handicapping is not only the points you brought up, but how is the refereeing going to change?
Yeah. Well, one more point on this. Is there any value to first quarter betting in terms of coaches? Are there other variables that we can consider, or is it just too random and we just have to let it play out with these coaches?
Yes, the number one value is you get a very live feed that shows you the coin toss, and you immediately race to the screen to bet the team that that's going to get the ball first to win that first quarter.
Okay.
How about betting the unders? How about betting the unders first quarter for the side that has the new coach?
Anything to that at all?
I don't know. I'm asking.
Team total for a coach?
Yeah, team total.
I'm just throwing these things out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm kind of the inverse, where I'd rather hurry up and wait than to kind of plunge in and try to exploit what may or may not happen. With NFL, I like to work off of what I have seen happen when it comes to the games. So I'm not looking to fish out and farm out all these different angles like for week one actual game betting, because I think the variables are just astounding.
Yeah, there are a lot of them.
Expect the unexpected is my viewpoint.
By the way, nice John Wooden there. Hurry up and wait. I don't know what that meant, but I'm totally confused.
I'm going to call question number 2 inconclusive. There are some things that we can explore a little bit more, but I get that we don't have a definite take. We don't even know if offenses are ahead of defenses based on the pandemic, like you mentioned, that saw the spike. And then last year, Chris mentioning that, maybe the bookmakers put the lines too high and there were a lot of unders. But just something to think about as we move on to question number 3, because maybe something will emerge, and it's not full game that we're necessarily looking at, but just little nuances in terms of quarters and halves. Okay, referees. Chris knows about this one because I gave him like 4 talking points in the Super Bowl between Kansas City and Tampa Bay, why that referee crew was so matched with all the offsides penalties that Kansas City had, and such a low total for the over-under for referee number of penalties in that game. Based on the fact that they wanted to see a clean game. They didn't want referees to decide the game. There was a controversial call in the championship game and all that. And then the penalties went sky high over. So my question is here, I've gone ahead and matched up many times referee tendencies with team tendencies. If you know in advance, and we all know in advance who the referee assignments are week by week, if you know what referee is assigned to what game, is there anything that you think you could look at from a handicapping standpoint that would cause you to go over and under in a game? Can you use that information in handicapping?
Well, I could just say from my standpoint, I'm looking at things more from a broadcasting end because my handicapping days are limited these years. I don't pay attention to that at all until the game starts, and then I'll have a feel for it. So it doesn't affect me and how I think of the game. But from a handicapping standpoint, we've talked about this forever. I'm sure. I mean, you're looking at, wait a minute, total penalties in this game? How many flags are going to be thrown? If you got that as a prop play, you're already all over it, depending on the team they got there, right?
Well, go ahead, Ron, respond.
Well, I want to take it one step further for you, Chris, and that's if you know a team that a particular game is going to have more penalties or less penalties, does that affect how you would look at a game from a total or a handicapping standpoint?
Yeah, it does. And, why do we know the Hockley name? We should know the name of NFL referees. And it got so bad. I mean, what about Thanksgiving, the Raiders-Dallas game? I believe that didn't that tie or come close to the record number of penalties? But you knew going in what the refereeing crew was, and that did kind of affect the handicap a little bit. And I mentioned it beforehand, and I never even bothered with the referees before. Probably, I knew about it 2 years ago. I actually started looking at it and being aware of it last year, and it is going to be a regular handicap because by the end of last season, it was getting so bad that the Twitter timelines were just filled with just everybody, bringing up Hockley's name. It's always him over and over again. And he's not the only one. As Ron, you mentioned, there are crews that are going to call certain types of penalties throughout that is going to help certain styles of quarterback or running back or defense. And you need to be aware of that. And that is going to affect the totals. That is going to affect the either the ability to move the ball or not be able to move the ball. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we've seen in basketball where you have a lot of penalties early in a college basketball game, and they're going to go to the free throw line. That's going to affect overs. There's a really good way to handicap this as it goes in game. So as more and more people are doing in-game betting, if you see referees swallow the whistle, is there any way to say that would affect overs or unders?
Well, my question to you, Chris, is how did that affect? You said you really started to pay attention last year more than ever. How did that affect what you did, and how did you do because of that?
If they're going to swallow the whistles, that's going to probably be that the defenses are getting away with what they shouldn't be getting away with. I mean, generally, that's where the enforcement's going to come. So if they're swallowing the whistles, then it's going to be harder to move that ball. It's going to affect not only the spread, but it's going to affect the scoring level. And you can't look for there to be elevated scoring in that situation.
Right. But I'm wondering. Point. But I'm wondering, Chris, how did the previous thing we talked about with Hockley and how many flags they threw? How did that affect what you played last year? And do you recall doing well because of that?
No, I don't believe. You know what? I believe it was an evaluation type situation where you knew this was going to happen, and I don't actually remember benefiting per se, but it was a clear plausibility. For whatever reason, my handicap was going to be the handicap, but that was a concern issue for me. And honestly, since it's a surprise topic, I don't recall.
No, that's fine. No, I'm just curious because it is now a part of the evaluation process when it wasn't before, right?
Correct. It is.
Yeah. And I think without putting words in your mouth, Chris, neither one of us has spent a lot of time in-game wagering. But now if we're going to trend in that direction just a little bit more, test the waters. This is one variable that might be interesting, because in the pro game, if you call pass interferences, that could be a 40-yard penalty or a 50-yard penalty because it's spotted ball. But if you swallow your whistle, like you said, Chris, which was an incredible point that people should understand, and you're not getting those free half the way down the field plays, and you have to work harder to get down the field. And plus, if they're not calling the penalty, you've already lost the down because it's an incomplete pass. It's going to be tougher to score.
You know, it really branches out into an area which I fully expect to actually participate in this season. It has to affect the prop market too. There has to be ways to exploit the prop market that are not factoring in the refereeing, and they're just going by, you know, how they used to do NBA first halves and second halves. They used to just slice the full game total in half, or the quarters they divided by 4. And we know from experience that's not the way it works, and that's going to be the way you're going to find it doesn't work in props. Also, when you start factoring in the refereeing crew, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Any comments on that, Ted?
No, I mean, just the fact that to me the refereeing means a lot in every single game, but often it doesn't mean that much within a game, because unless you have more of the extreme that what you're expecting from a crew, it probably is no big deal, and you don't need any extra crap in your head to affect how you're trying to evaluate a damn bet. You know what I mean? If it's there, it's there, but don't look for it, because otherwise it might screw up everything.
Ted, how much pissing and moaning amongst the coaches and players that you interact with is there about the penalties, and how justified is it?
Absolutely. It's there, no doubt about it. But look, these guys, they constantly talk about it, but it's not just football. It's every sport. You got to go with the flow. You got to be able to, you know, like Superman with bullets bouncing off of him. You can't let it affect you, because otherwise it's going to screw up the way they're going to do the rest of the game. So people, they know the crews. They know which ones might affect the style of play that they have within a game. So it's definitely an issue, but I don't think it's an issue on a game by game. It's not necessarily within a game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it just drives home the point again that we've got another variable to consider. There's more prop markets, like Chris said. There's more in-game betting, like Chris said. So just another thing we're trying to get a look at handicapping edge.
Yeah, get an edge. Exactly.
I mean, that's all we're looking for.
Right. And by the way, you know, we always talk about the playoffs, excuse me, and with all the prop bets there are many more of them. I mean, how often do you have how many penalties will be called during a regular season game?
Primetime games only. So you'll get your Sunday night and your Monday night and your Thursday night.
So that's what you focus on, right?
Yeah. So, you know, we're ahead of the game, and there's interesting that if you have enough books out there, and some of them don't put up props, but they only put up props for the playoffs.
Yeah.
If they're using their own or they're slow moving, you've got some books that are not good at this. They're not skilled at putting this up. It's like draft props. People don't know how to put draft props up, and they get exploitable. And that's another edge that handicappers have that shouldn't be taken lightly.
Yeah, no, take advantage of that. Absolutely.
That's all I got. You guys get A+ for answering my questions today.
Where were you when I was in school?
Yeah.
That was way too easy.
Those were great questions.
I think every once in a while we're going to put up some random thoughts that we have, and Chris has put us under a microscope. Now I've done that. Maybe Ted will put Chris and I under the microscope, but we look forward to more shows in the future. Chris, wrap us up.
I couldn't say it any better. Thanks, Ron and Ted, and we'll see all of you again soon. And one of these days, I'll wrap up a show properly.